lot of times on the GMAT, it's better to work with fractions than percents because it makes your math easier when you're unable to use a calculator. So I've listed out a bunch of percents here that relate to common fractions, and I just want to walk through how I think about them. So one of the most common percentages that's related to a common fraction is 50%, which everyone knows is equal to 1/2. And if you notice, half of 50% is 25%, and we all know that that's worth 1/4, because 1/2 divided by 2 gives you 1/4. Now, 12.5% is 1/2 of 25%, which means it's going to be 1/2 of 1/4. And 1/2 of 1/4 is equal to 1/8. So this is 1/8. 33% is another common fraction that you should know. That's 1/3. And 16.67 is half of 1/3, which means it's 1/6. So anytime you do half of a number, you just multiply by 1/2. And when you multiply fractions, you multiply the tops, and separately you multiply the bottoms, which gives you 1/6. Now, 11.11% is 1/3 of 33.33%, and that is equal to 1/9. Another way of thinking about this is, what would I have to multiply this top part by in order to get to 100? Well, I would have to multiply it by 9, meaning that this is about equivalent to 1/9. Because if I have 11.11 on top, if I multiply the top and the bottom by 9, I'm going to end up with 100/900, and that reduces to 1/9. So whatever you need to multiply the top by to get to 100 will also help you determine what you would multiply the bottom by to create a fraction that is probably going to be a lot more usable in terms of determining what the simplified fraction looks like. So that's a trick I like to use, especially on stuff like 9.09. Here, if I multiply by 11, I'll get to 100, which means this is 1/11. And this is one you'll probably just want to memorize and put down on a note card. 10% is one that you should know. It's 1/10. 20% is 2/10. It's not on the list, but that would be 2/10, which is equal to 1/5. 5% is 1/20. Now, anytime you see something that ends in a 5%, you know that this is some sort of 20ths. And in this situation, the way I think of this is 15 short of 100. And 100 is 20/20ths because 100% is just 1. So if I'm 15 short, how many increments of 5 is that? That's 3, which means I'm 3 short of 20, which leaves me at 17/20ths. And that's how I think of increments of 5%. And then 1%, of course, is 1/100. And you can always think in terms of that. Now, another way to ballpark numbers, for example, let's take the 9.09% example again. We know it's between 10% and 5%, which means it's between 1/10 and 1/20. And we can think of 1/10 as 2/20, but in this example, I think it's also good to think of it simply as 1/10. And if you know something is between these two numbers, and sorry, reverse that sign there. If you know something is between these two numbers, then it could probably be expressed as 1 over something between 10 and 20, which is what we get here with the 11. And obviously it was pretty close to 10%, so the 11 is pretty close to 10 on the denominator as well. And that's how I think about fractions generally. A lot of times it's easier to work with these than it is to work with percentages. So make sure to memorize the common ones. And if you get stuck, you should be able to kind of interpolate your way there by thinking about other common fractions and percents that you're already aware of.